Yeah, here it is. That's the Moore residence. Yeah, Dr. Moore. See, that was 1956. You say? Yeah. Right. That was a very interesting house, using the, here's the Palos Verdes stone steps, and later when you come up to the building, it also had the Palos Verdes stone base around it, and using plywood though for the exterior covering. And the plywood has held up very well over the years. Quite remarkable.
But how was it initially finished, the plywood?
The plywood initially had a light transparent stain, what we call a light creosote stain. And it was a very light, warm gray, but you could see the grain of the wood. And of course, over the years, as they kept adding more stain to it, even though it was a light-bodied stain, it kept building, the pigmentation kept building up to finally now it looks like a paint, but it originally was not painted. It was just a very light stain.
Do you know, when you first walk up to that, it has a sense of the chapel in it a little bit, because of the stone and the overhangs, the way they hang out there, and you're looking through it.
Yes, and the way the walks come up.
It just reminds you of the chapel.
And of course, here's the interesting thing with the water, the fountain out in the front. He always had that element of water.
It's got a lot of that same feeling.
How did the client take to the idea of the main living spaces being on the second level rather than the first level?
Well, of course, there, I think they took to it fine because what he was trying to do was get them the view, get up to the view. And there is another thing too. The alley behind the house comes in at the upper level. So if you're driving in your car and parking your car behind, you're at that level, and that's where you bring in the groceries. And but the visitors come in on the first level, and then the entry hall, they walk up the stairs from the entry hall into the living room.
You know, this is so much different though when I look at the Doherty's house, you know, the Darby house.
Yeah.
Where the house is built right in the hill, you know, with the block. Then you see this. It's almost like a total different change that came about.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, did your dad go through something emotional or spiritual? When I look at the two, they're such extremes almost.
Well, I think a lot of it had dealt with the use of materials and the site and the structural forms that he was working with, because he was always experimenting, always moving along. He never stayed in any one set form, because each building offered a new opportunity to experiment and work with different forms and different building materials. So he never, just got a hold of concrete block and said, well, I'm going to do all my structures now in concrete block. And so you'll see a continuous movement of his architecture from the 20s on through until the 70s.
It kind of reminded me a little bit of Goff, because he went to such extremes. And when I first visited Goff, this was back in '79, he had such an admiration of your father. I mean, it's amazing. Yeah. In fact, he gave me a copy of, was a Japanese magazine, a Holy Shoes.
SD.
SD. And he many times mentioned your dad to me. It just, I don't know the connection between the two, but...
The fenestration is really elegant here, really elegant.
Yes, with those little triangles.
Yes, it is, and it fits the interior use of space. That coming in up that stairway, moving.
Yes, it was very effective coming up through the entryway, and then because you're coming up interiorly, and you do get little glimpses through the glass openings, and then you come to the living room and get the view of the ocean. Suddenly opens up. It's very dramatic.
Yes.
Well, that is. It just.
And this shows you can see the form work, the form boards.
Now here there seems to be less stone per cubic foot.
That's right, and it's just what they could picked out of the site and get in, and probably took a little less care picking them for here.
But it's a very nice effect. It's a different effect.
It's a different effect. They were using smaller stones.
Yeah.